Hey everybody, thank you for joining CHCI's webinar, Personal Branding in the Digital Age, which is very proudly sponsored by State Farm. Thank you, State Farm, for your partnership in this webinar. Today we're going to talk for about the next 45 minutes about personal branding, about the tools of social, digital media, how the worlds of mobile technology and the tools, the apps, the websites, all these online tools that have become so much a part of our life are really central to our thriving in the professional world. So we have three speakers that are going to join us that I think not only can provide insight on this stuff from multiple perspectives, but also bring very, very unique insights on the way that they've personally used digital tools, branding, both for themselves and for their clients and for their bosses. So by way of introduction, let me first introduce Joe Miller. He is founder and president of WashingTech, and he will talk a little bit about himself in just a few moments. We also have Erica Rendon, who is a CHCI alumna, and she is now the special advisor on digital strategy to Secretary Julian Castro at HUD. To get us going, though, I'd like to start with a short conversation or a short video from Ted Rubin. Ted Rubin, at Ted Rubin on Twitter, is one of these thought leaders, early principals, early kind of business minds that have been creating connections between brands and social media. So he's going to talk for a few minutes from his perspective about what is the opportunity for all of us today in embracing social tools and using them in our professional lives.
Hey everybody, excited to be here. Jason, thanks so much for asking me to be a part, to talk about all the changes that are happening for business branding, for personal branding. You know, I like to say a really important message to business is change your framework to change your future. What happens a lot is we get stuck in what's working now and we forget to understand the way things are changing. Sometimes we don't look at the new platforms, the new business environment, our ability to spread our message. You know, I call this the age of influence, where anybody can build a brand, affect change, make a difference 24/7 without ever leaving your bedroom. I mean, imagine that. Now, I'm not advising all you guys to never leave your bedroom. What I'm trying to talk about is the fact that now, around the clock, we have the ability to reach out and connect to people and to talk about what's important to us and, more importantly, what's important to them. So let's think about that. Let's think about what has changed. It used to be, if you were working for a company, you needed to have budget to go to events, to spend time talking to people, to spread your message, especially if you weren't working for a brand and you wanted to do this on your own and you wanted to go out, reach out, talk to people, change the way they're thinking. But today, we have platforms that enable us to all be publishers, to connect with people around the clock. Now, what I like to talk about all the time are relationships. I talk about something called return on relationships, and I say that relationships are the new currency. Now, I know you're all sitting out there and you're thinking, relationships are the new currency. Relationships have always been currency. I mean, we all know that expression. It's not what you know, it's who you know. The difference is that now we can build relationships all the time, from anywhere. I mean, you come out of a meeting, you're walking on the street, you get into a cab, you can be building relationships. You can be connecting with the people that you just left without having to make a phone call, without having to get them to answer a call. You can be sending them a message, you can be posting something about the meeting, you can be using all different types of platforms, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, now Snapchat, to talk about people and share those experiences. And you can be doing it all the time. So, you know, we talk about all these different platforms and what we have on there. Fans, friends, followers. Are they an audience or are they an asset? I like to think of them as an asset. We all use that word audience. I do too. It's part of our vernacular. It's part of the way we speak. But what we need to start doing is thinking about all these people we connect with as an asset. Now, think about it. How many people out there own a home? Probably a good deal of you guys. Or if you don't own a home, you aspire to own a home. What happens when you buy a home? You want to make it better. You want to sell it for more than you bought it for. So what do? You paint it, you improve it, you care for it. This is the way we have to start thinking about our relationships. All the people we connect with. It's not just a click of a button. Now think about this. Facebook has done a remarkable thing. Absolutely remarkable. They've taken ownership of the word friend. As a marketer, I look at them and go, oh my God, what an incredible thing they've done. But as a human being, I say, oh my God, we have to take that word back and give it value again. Think about this. Think about the word friend, close your eyes, and see what comes into your head. I will wager you anything that it's not an image of a friend, but it's a Facebook logo. They've taken that word and made it part of what they do. And they've made us believe that clicking a button means making a friend. But clicking a button does not mean making a friend. If I reach out and I shake your hand, are we friends? No. That's an open door. That's an invitation to build a friendship. And what we have to start doing is what I call looking people in the eye digitally. This is so important to your companies. This is so important to you and your personal brand, because what you're mistaking is relationships by just connecting with somebody. Now, think about this. When I graduated college, and look, I'm an old guy. I'm 58 years old. I graduated college in 1980. And I got a sales job. Now, my dad was in sales. So the first week, he calls me up. He goes, do you have your first appointment? I said, yeah. He goes, when is it? I said, Friday. He said, what time? I said, 10 o'clock. He said, what time are you going to get there? I said, I don't know, about 5 to 10. He goes, no, get there at 9 o'clock. Walk around the neighborhood. Get to know what businesses are there. Go into the building. See what else is in that building that they're in. Get into the person's office. See if you can get his or her assistant or secretary to let you in there and see what's on the walls. Are there photos of children? Are there pictures of people playing golf? Are there pictures of fishing? Find out what's important to that person, so when you're talking to them, you can connect with them emotionally about something they're interested in. But today, there's no excuse not to do these things. I mean, then it took a lot of time, it took a lot of effort. Now all you have to do is click to LinkedIn, you have to go to Google, you go to Facebook. There's no excuse to walk into a meeting and not know something about the person you're meeting with. And by the way, you're thinking, well, what is this about personal branding? Now Ted's talking about sales or how to connect with people. But a brand is what a business or a person does. A reputation is what people remember and share. And every action you take, everything you're doing, is building your reputation. So think about this. How do we connect with people? You're thinking, let's do it on a mass level. I can put out one post, everybody sees it. But what I'm going to urge you to do is, in conjunction with doing that, to connect with people one by one. And here's the problem. You're thinking, this doesn't scale, but it does. Because what I will tell you is the majority of people do not want to connect with you one-on-one. They're not going to reach out to your brand. They're not going to reach out to you. Look, I do this all the time. I'll do it here. My phone number is 516-270-5511. Feel free to give me a call anytime or text me. Now, I can do that on stages when there's 5,000 to 10,000 people in the audience because nobody calls. Sure, I get a few calls here and there, and that's great because those are the people that make the extra effort to reach out. But what do? I'm building my brand because people are saying, Ted Rubin's giving out his phone number when he's on stage. And inevitably, somebody dials that number when I'm on stage because they want to see if I'm giving out the real number, which I am. Because then people talk about it. And the other thing is when you connect with people, what happens is people see you connect with that person, especially when you do it on social platforms. Or even if you do it via that phone call, I guarantee you that person's going to go online, they're going to go to Twitter, they're going to go to Facebook, they're going to go somewhere else, they're going to say, oh my God, I called Ted Rubin and he answered the phone. Or, oh my God, I called George and he responded. And what does that do? That builds your brand, because the majority of people on social media participate in a way that I call participating vicariously. They watch the conversations of others, and then they feel a part of it. Think of a cocktail party, a big cocktail party, a few hundred people in a room. Look around that room and you'll see there's pockets of people around the room. And out of all those hundreds of people, there's probably 5 or 6 people that are actually doing most of the talking, and they're surrounded by a group of people. And then usually in that group of people that are surrounding them, there's 1 or 2 that are engaging with them. But what I will tell you, and you think about your own experiences, is that when you walk away from that conversation, when they walk away from that conversation, they will feel a connection. Because social is a facilitator of relationships. But remember, it's not the relationship itself. What you've got to do, you've got to build trust. Trust is how you build your personal brand. Because when you build trust, you build conversation, you build loyalty, and you build people that want to do things for you. How do you build trust? It's based on interaction. Okay? When I just shake your hand, we're not friends because we haven't interacted at all. But when we have a conversation, when you call me sometime, when you email me for some information, when you maybe just as simple as like something or make a comment on my Facebook page, and I write back and appreciate it or check mark it or let somebody else know you did it, that's an interaction. That builds trust. Consistency builds trust. Be consistent. And the best way to be consistent is to be yourself. Now, I know you hear this word a lot, authenticity. And sometimes people feel it's being overused. I don't think it's overused because I think most people are not actually authentic. They either want to be someone else, want to portray something, think they're not good enough so they don't want to necessarily portray who they are. That's got to change because the easiest person to be is you. And that's the easiest way to create consistency. And be true to your word, and like I said earlier, authentic, and most importantly, genuine. Do for others without expectation of anything directly in return. And what I promise you is others will do for you. And start thinking about your reputation, not your ranking. You know all these reports that come out, and this one's ranked here, or in your company you might have ranks. What's more important than where you're ranked is what people say about you, how they feel about you, what they think about you. Think connection, not network. How many people have I actually connected with? I like to say that a network gives you reach, but a community gives you power because communities support each other. Networks connect, communities care. So start thinking, how many people can I connect with versus how many people I can network with. Now, networking is a good place to start because that's where you get your universe of people that you can then connect with. And by the way, your network is very valuable because as you connect with people, they're going to let others know you connected. And then more people are going to reach out to you and people are going to talk about that. So start thinking connection and think loyalty, not celebrity. Ladies in the audience, do any of you actually think you'll look like Andy McDowell if you use L'Oreal cosmetics? I doubt it. But you do know you can look like your friend, your neighbor, your business colleague. So you trust what they have to say. And that's where loyalty comes from. So think of these three things: reputation, connection, loyalty. Very, very important. And if you're only focused on the money, you're going to forget about the most important thing, the people. So I like to talk about just being nice. I use a hashtag just be nice. I use the hashtag be good to people. I wear t-shirts that say it. You should see the different way people interact and engage with me when I wear those t-shirts. I wear them whenever I travel. And you know how difficult it can be when you travel, how stressful it can be. Well, flight attendants, gate attendants, they all see my shirt, they look for the smile on my face, and they treat me differently. So start thinking about that. And I also want to talk about something that's really important. You know, a lot of you guys hear this talk about millennials. Millennials this, millennials that. Millennials are changing everything. Millennials are changing nothing. I like to say that boomers were the original millennials because they were the first guys to change laws, to stop a war, for civil rights, for all the things that changed. But what happened was boomers had to go back to work or get a job, and they couldn't continue doing it. But now, in this day and age, we can do so many things at once. You can build your brand, you can march on Washington, you can make change in your community at the same time as you're doing everything else. You can do it during the day, you can do it at night. Don't forget this. Think about young people. The reason things are changing is because technology is changing. The reason we look at millennials and Generation Z and say they're different, they're not different. Genetically, they're the same as us. They're growing up in a different environment. But that environment is seeping up to all of us, and we can all take advantage of that. So I'm telling you, build a brand by talking to people, by writing what you think, but most importantly, by connecting with people and building a reputation for what you stand for. I'm looking forward to seeing some of you guys. You know my phone number now. My email is tedrubin@gmail.com. I'm at tedrubin on Twitter, on Instagram, on Snapchat, and just about everywhere else. Please reach out and engage. I'll look forward to it. Make it a great day, and remember, relationships are like muscle tissue. The more you engage them, the stronger and more valuable they become. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. As always, enigmatic, inspirational, and thoughtful. So, Erica, I want to start with you and ask you, What's important about digital media from a branding perspective? Is digital and social the new professional capital?
Hey, Jason, that's a really great question. I think that digital media is really essential in reaching people now. Majority of people get their news online, whether that's from Twitter or visiting online publications. So ensuring that your firm or your brand has a digital arm is really important in today's world. We use it heavily here at the department in order to reach people. One of the mottos of the digital folks within the administration is to find people where they are, and that's typically right in the palm of their hands with a cell phone or a tablet or what have you. So we're constantly looking at different ways to reach people through those platforms. With the secretary, we use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and medium.com as well.
Yeah, so I've seen the secretary's medium.com blog, for better word, lack of a better word, and I think it's fantastic. Great pictures, great insights, really accessible. I think you all are doing fantastic work. Joe, let me ask you the same question. So is digital the new professional capital?
Absolutely. By all means. I mean, everyone in any line of work today, whether they're doctors, whether they're lawyers, whether they're elected officials, everyone has to have fluency with not just social media, because that's really one aspect, but everyone really needs to be a marketer now. So it's understanding audiences, understanding data, understanding how to reach different segments of the audience, and then constantly engaging them so that you don't lose them. And then bringing new people into the pipeline as they leave school, for example. So a lot of folks are coming out of college today who are more accustomed to Snapchat than Twitter. So there's just this constant process of staying on top of really marketing plans, and social media is just one aspect of that.
So Joe, I listen to your podcast. I'm a huge fan of your work. The Washington podcast, for those of you listening, if you just want to understand what's going on in the policy landscape as relates to technology, that mix of like intellectual property and broadband adoption, and what's going on with minority adoption versus our richer or whiter counterparts, Joe's podcast is the place to go, and you make it easy, accessible, and valuable. And I've seen you kind of experiment with other strategies around your consulting business as well. How has the podcast, how have your digital tools helped you to reestablish yourself in a kind of the next branch of your career?
Well, that's a good question, Jason. As I was saying before, just as social media is one aspect of marketing, so is the podcast. So I'm in the process now of building the podcast and building that audience, and then using that to develop a whole new set of services for organizations that are looking for really digital marketing strategies. So as a one-man shop currently, with the exception of contractors that I bring in to work on different aspects of the podcast, it's really kind of dealing with a podcast on a sort of the ground level, building the audience there. And then from that, leveraging that and leveraging the authority that I build from the podcast to then build a larger organization at some point.
Gotcha. So I want to stick with you for a minute, Joe, and both of you are going to share some really fantastic examples with us. But Joe, I want to talk with you a little bit about kind of the back end. So first, why a podcast? You could just tweet all day. You could share on Facebook. You could just develop memes. Why did you choose to develop a podcast and go that route to developing a business brand and developing value for your clients or your potential clients in that way?
Sure, Jason. Well, I'll cover this in my brief presentation. But the key things about as a podcast is that it's mobile. There's a lot of growth with podcasts, especially in DC. People are so consumed with all these white papers and court filings, and they want to have a life. They want to go out to dinner with their friends. They want to have fun. And so a podcast is a great way to get them the information they need in a compact form that they can listen to while they're on the metro, while they're in their cars driving, while they're walking between meetings, so that they're caught up at least on what's happening. They'll still have to read the briefs if they're going to file comments in a particular proceeding, or if they're working on a statement that their member that they're a staff of needs done. They're still going to have to do that, but at least they'll know what's going on in terms of the state of play in various different policy areas, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's copyright, whether it's any number of topics that are diversity and inclusion. Really getting a kind of a level set for what happened that week, so that they're informed when they're developing their own work products, and then hear from an expert on a whatever topic is driving the week.
Absolutely. I've listened to podcasts anywhere from like 7:30 in the morning when I'm coming down from a workout to 7 o'clock at night when I'm driving home from somewhere. They're just, I love the medium. I think they're so valuable. Let's get a little bit into your presentation. If we could advance the slides. I know you're going to talk a little bit about specifically podcasting for policymakers. I think that you are absolutely on the leading edge of this stuff in DC. We know that people put out white papers and policy briefs like every single day in Washington, and you are actively trying to think about how you take that massive information that no one wants to read and make it both accessible, interesting, resonating, and powerful. So talk just a little bit about that.
So, as I was saying before, there's several aspects to marketing, and so podcasting is one thing, and then within podcasting there's so many different areas. You have getting set up, you have growing your audience, you have monetizing your audience if that's what you want to do. So today I'm going to just focus on getting set up so that you can at least get started doing a podcast if that's what you want to do for yourself or for your organization. So this is really about building a podcast so that you can develop your authority in the particular area that you're working on. We can cover what audience you want to target and all of that in a separate presentation if you like, or you can call me. I'm happy to talk to you for free. It's not something that I would charge for at this point, but I'd be happy to talk about it with any of you if you need advice. Happy to grab coffee and talk about this stuff. So if we could go to the next slide, please. All right, so as I was saying before, podcasting is just experiencing explosive growth. You can see from these numbers from Rainmaker FM and Foundation Digital that the number of podcasting listeners is on the rise. It's up 17% since last year, and podcasting itself is on the rise. When this survey was done last year, there were 60,000 podcasts active on the site, and so this kind of this is great, but actually is becoming more competitive, and so we're going to have to start figuring out how to get your message across in an environment that's becoming more and more, I don't want to say cluttered because each podcast reaches a niche audience, but how are you going to reach that audience where there are all these different podcasts happening out there? So could we go to the next slide, please? So why podcasting? Well, it's low cost. It's a mobile audience, as I was saying earlier. It brings your personality to the content. So if it's unlike a white paper, it really gives a personality. It helps you develop a rapport with your audience. It makes it seem like you're more of a friend. You're more engaging with them directly. When you have a podcast, they'll leave reviews and comments, so you can refine your podcast as you go along based on their feedback. So it's a lot more interactive. And then it reaches a niche audience. So whatever your paper's on, if that's a particular topic that you focus on within your organization that you want to build more authority on, then that's your niche, and then you can use a podcast to do that. So next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to talk about the equipment, and that's really what you need are these 5 things: a laptop, a mixing board, a microphone, a good microphone, a pair of headphones, and a digital recorder. That's pretty much it. So next slide, please. So I won't get into the laptop because I assume you have a laptop. I have a MacBook Pro. MacBook Air is fine. Any number of Microsoft laptops are fine. So we'll assume you have a laptop and just go into the mixing board. You're going to want to have a mixing board because you can control your levels live with a mixing board. So if you can see at the bottom row there are a number of channels. So, you know, if I'm doing a podcast with Jason, for example, I'll have him in one channel so I can control my microphone level in relation to his. If there's music on there, I can have that in another channel and control the levels on that so that it's live and you can actually hear what's going on through your headphones. Next slide, please. And in terms of equipment, the Heil PR40 is the choice microphone. That's the one on the right. But when you're just getting started out, if you're working in a nonprofit, I mean NPR is a nonprofit. They have microphones much more powerful than the Heil PR40. But if you're just starting out, the Audio-Technica 2100 is $80 on Amazon, and that's going to give you the sound you're looking for. Next slide, please. All right, these are my favorites, these headphones. I've used these headphones for years. These are the Sony MDR 7506s. Again, affordable, $80 for a pair of headphones. They come with a little bag you can carry around. They fold up, you put them in the bag. They're really great to monitor what's going on. Next slide, please. And this is your digital recorders. So this is going to eliminate a lot of your machine noise. So instead of recording on your laptop, if there's any buzzing or humming going on, this avoids all that. So you can record directly into your digital recorder. And it's at $220, but you'll find that it's worth it because like I said, it eliminates all that noise. And then once you're done recording the file, you just upload it into your file manager. Next slide, please. All right, so now the platform plugins and software. So we're going to talk about the platform editing software, a firing interface. I'll get into that in post-production. Next slide, please. All right, so you're going to need something to host your site on, and that's and deliver your content. And you know, WordPress is free. I highly recommend that. You're also going to want a podcast player. The one that I use is Pat Flynn's Smart Podcast Player for $99 a year. There's some other ones out there, but these are the two platforms that I use. Next slide, please. Okay, and then editing software. I use Audacity. It's free. Some people use GarageBand on their MacBooks. Other people use Adobe Audition. But those files I was telling you about earlier, once you have that digital recorder and you upload the files, you're going to open up Audacity, import the file to Audacity, and that's where you're going to do your editing. Next file, please. Next file, please. Slide. All right, so this is your instant firing software. If you're familiar with a cart machine or you listen to the radio, you hear that the person's talking over the music and then the next thing you hear is the commercials. Well, that person is standing in the studio and firing each one of those elements live. So you can upload each of your files into each of those slots, and while you're recording into your digital recorder, release each element when you want it right on the nose. You don't have to splice it in later. It saves a lot of editing time later on because it fires instantly. Next slide, please. And then post-production, Auphonic. Depending on your environment when you're recording, Auphonic eliminates a lot of noise. Sometimes I have a lot more noise than other times because sometimes I forget, when I do these from home, I forget to turn off the HVAC. So a lot of times this Auphonic, when I run it through Auphonic, the Auphonic will eliminate a lot of that background noise and will really give it sort of a richer sound. And you can get free, 200 minutes free, so that's good for starting out, and then $11 for 9 hours. Next slide, please. All right, and you want to make sure that you have separate hosting, one for your WordPress and one for your podcast, because if the site goes down, then your podcast is going down. So you want to make sure that you use Libsyn to host each episode of the podcast. Libsyn will also give you data if you want to get sponsorship, so you'll be able to use your Libsyn data to show how many downloads and listeners you have. I recommend WP Engine for the site. It's a really robust platform. Again, it's on the expensive side, but this is the one I recommend, and that's $290 a year. Next slide, please. And then you want to submit the file to distributors. So once you record it and edit it, you want to submit it to all of these different distributors, all of them. Next slide, please. And then you want to use Buffer or Hootsuite to go ahead and send out your content to your audience. Buffer will, if you're not familiar with Buffer or Hootsuite, they let you schedule your posts throughout the day so that you don't have to monitor it on an ongoing basis. You can do it, you can have it part of your workflow, schedule everything you need to go out when you need it, and then you don't have to worry about it until next time. Next slide, please.
I'm a big fan of Hootsuite.
Yeah, those are really great platforms. And then just some miscellaneous resources. My intro was done by musicradiocreative.com. My announcer actually just won an Emmy that I found out. So these are really cost-effective ways to get really quality announcers on your show. I used Jenny Hampson to design my podcast logo, and then Pond5 is the site that I use for theme music and sound effects. Next slide, please. All right, so thank you very much. That concludes getting set up. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions about audience targeting, growing your audience. Maybe we can work on it together because it's something we're all basically trying to figure out. But thanks so much for your time.
So Joe, and I want to bring you into this, Erica, as well. But what do you think? So if I'm really early on, I'm like an early career policy person, or I'm just on the hill, and I'm not quite ready to launch my own podcast. What's like the one or two things that I must be doing, even if I want to set the groundwork for later kind of developing an audience and using these tools to really establish myself as an expert?
Erica, you want me to take this one, or you want to field it?
For both of you.
Okay.
Oh, Erica, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay. So I think that Facebook is definitely a platform that members or anyone in policy really should consider getting on. There's been article after article saying that Facebook is still winning as much as we don't want it to be. It's a really great way to reach citizens, you can, now with all the different trends that they're doing, different photos, different ways to show photos, there's so many internal things within Facebook. They have something called Facebook Note that is very similar to Medium, so it's almost like a one-stop shop that's really easy to use. You also have a scheduling tool that you mentioned that Hootsuite also has. Everything's all in one, so for starters, I would always suggest Facebook. Instagram is also a really great way to go. People love photos. You can tell a story with a really powerful picture and maybe not even have a caption at all. It's a really light lift and a really good thing to use.
So, but how do I differentiate between my personal use of the mediums and my professional goals? Like, I have Instagram, and you know, I think the two of you follow me on Instagram, but I have like 125 people that I will not accept because I don't really, you know, it's a pretty personal medium for me. But then I think, well, it's such a great medium for engaging people. Am I losing out? Am I missing out? How do you make these decisions for you personally when it comes to developing a brand? Either one of you.
You know, there's some really great resources. It's a lot of work, okay? I mean, it's just every day trying to figure out what to do. So, you know, you have your personal brand, and then you have the brand for your business. There are some resources out there, some free resources that help you develop a personal brand and what goes into developing personal brand. Dan Shaw Bell is like the guy who knows all about personal branding. There are others out there like Amy Porterhouse. So these are folks who are familiar with building a personal brand, and you know, it starts with what your values are, what your goals are, and then really building from there. And then there's the brand for your business. So they're really sort of two separate entities, and they're things that have to constantly be massaged and reconfigured as you adjust and adapt to your audience and your values.
I think you make a really good point, especially in terms of your audience. You need to know who. First, ask yourself, who is it that you want to reach? And then look into what platforms they're using. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but the Pew Research Center has really good information about what age groups are using what platforms. So if you want to reach 35 and above, probably want to gravitate towards Twitter and Facebook. If you want to reach people that are 12 to 18, Snapchat is probably the way to go. So ask yourself first, who is my audience? And then also keep in mind that with that, the message for each platform, although very similar, you want to share the same thing, is going to be communicated very differently.
So then, does that mean that I got my LinkedIn life, and then I have my Twitter life, and then my Facebook life, but my Snapchat life is very, very different? How does that play out for a person trying to figure out how to use these tools, build a career, build a brand, have some fun at the same time?
Be careful. I think a lot of celebrities use Snapchat and they show what's going on in their personal life, but I'm not sure that's so great for the rest of us. So really, we're really on the cutting edge, while Snapchat is still cheap. Figuring out how to use it for business, how to use it for a little 10-second research presentations, for example, but that show you in context. That show you with other policymakers, show you at events and things like that. But I mean, it's tough, and as Erica said, each platform has a very different type of look and feel, different language that you have to use to reach that audience, and that's just in general. That doesn't even take account of the words and the way you're speaking the language of your own unique audience. You have to take that into account too. So it's really going in and finding resources to figure out each of those different audiences. That's the constant challenge.
I think the other thing too, in terms of professional use, and we talk about this a lot here, and I talk a lot about it with my colleagues, across the administration, is don't launch a platform professionally that you can't keep up with. Personally, there's no, not as much of a risk. You don't upload stuff to Instagram every day. Your friends aren't probably going to be texting you, why didn't you upload something last week or last night? But for professional use, if you feel like you can't maintain a Twitter account, totally fine. Stick with Facebook or stick with Instagram. Only launch what you can manage, and be really good at managing those.
And
you'll have more success.
And for both of you, what happens when you started Facebook, 5 years ago? You have all of your personal friends there, and then now you have all of your work colleagues, and then you have all these other folks from your professional life. Do you start to segment out? I mean, is there a place for kind of your very, very personal brand versus what you do on Facebook, for example, to engage a much larger group of people, or the world, for example?
Joe, I'll let you probably answer this question.
I think it depends. It depends on your strategy. You have to take your strategy into account before you do anything, because everything needs to be targeted. So I think instead of shooting off, just sort of shooting off as you might do with your friends at dinner, it really can't work that way for social media anymore if you're using it as part of a personal branding strategy. So if you don't want to pursue a personal branding strategy, that's fine. But if you really want to have a personal branding strategy and a strategy for your business, you have to follow the tactics that are consistent with your goals. So if you're trying to build awareness, that's one particular approach, an entirely different style of messaging on Facebook or any of these number of other platforms. Maybe building awareness. Maybe all of the platforms wouldn't even be appropriate for building awareness. Maybe you decide to just use Twitter and Facebook as opposed to including Snapchat in that. But it really starts with the strategy and starts with what your current goals are.
Absolutely. So Erica, I want to get into your work. I think that the ability, first of all, you're probably one of the first people in government to ever have your title, if you think about how far out ahead both the Secretary and HUD is in using digital strategy. But as a special advisor on digital strategy to Secretary Castro, I think you're doing some really, really fascinating work. I'd love to be able to kind of walk through here and for you to share some of the thinking that goes into some of the content that you develop, how you develop a strategy, how you push government into this arena, which is, I think, very, very new and probably not comfortable for everyone. Let's get into your work here.
Yeah. So we can go to the next slide. So this is actually, this particular example right here, I did a detailed trip with the second lady, with Dr. Biden. We went to Central and South America, and one of the things her communications director and I were discussing is how do we reach another audience. You know, she is one of the few that doesn't have Facebook. They found for her that Instagram and Twitter are the best way to reach people, reach her audience. So what was something else that we could use to tell the story? Essentially, that's what we're doing, right? We're storytellers. How do we tell the story of her trip and the purpose of her trip, which was economic empowerment for women and girls? So the day, I think, 2 days before she left on the trip, she launched her Medium account. And because we were traveling through Central and South America, one of the things that we wanted to focus on was also reaching the Latino audience here in the States. And how do we do that? So for every post that we had in English, we also translated into Spanish. The beauty of Medium is that it's not just text. I mean, Jason, you and I know if you're scrolling on Facebook and you see a paragraph of a status, you're going to keep flipping. But if you see a picture, you're going to stop, and it's going to cause you to read the caption. So that's one of the things that we focused on, is how can we intertwine the stories and some of the quotes from her remarks into telling the story from each day. Sorry, in the photos and the quotes from the remarks. So we can go to the next slide now. So this is another way that I approach this. Is photos always do really well in helping paint the picture about what's going on. A lot of times, you know, for example, we can take the president. Travels across the world, travels across the countries, meeting with folks all the time. We don't get to see that. We're not there with him. How do we get that message? A lot of times it's through photos. So the Secretary also recently visited Puerto Rico earlier this year to talk about affordable housing and to talk about the Zika crisis. And one of the ways that we shared that story or that trip with people was through Instagram, through Facebook, through Medium, and through Twitter. We use Twitter primarily for, as it's happening, real-time updates. Folks like to feel like they're a part of the trip. They want to know what's happening. So throughout his trip, we shared that. But then afterwards, you know, who really sits down and goes back into Twitter in their app and starts searching Secretary Castro, scrolling his feed? Not many people do. You don't typically, Twitter is not the platform where you go back and search for things, right? So how else can we piece everything together and show people what happened during the week? Let's say they missed it. So Medium is a really great way to do that. We started, and I'll be happy to share these links with folks later on, but it started with his first on-the-ground met with who he was meeting with there. And throughout the trip, I wrote the Medium posts in timestamp form, almost like we were following his official itinerary. Actually, we were following his official itinerary. 3 o'clock, I visited the local office. Tuesday at 7, I did this, you know, and giving people a sense of what's really happening, because that's what social media is all about, is giving people that access to something they typically don't have access to. And a lot of that is also like the dissemination of information, right? I'm a big fan of photos. I've probably said this too many times by now. Secretary hit his 1-year anniversary at the department when I was here, and how could I tell that story? What in that time had the department accomplished? And so same thing with this Medium post, pieced it together, and also we did something different here that we don't typically do. Had the secretary sit down and record a couple of photo reflections about his trip. So that's the other part of who is your audience and what is it that they want to consume. We always sometimes want to give these behind the scenes as it's happening, and we, you know, the other side of that too is how does the secretary feel about it? So this was an opportunity for him to speak directly to the people that that follow him, without having to set up, sometimes you don't have the capacity to do this type of video conferences with people. So this is another way to get folks to know what he's thinking about. Go to the next slide too. This was another example of an anniversary type of post. He hit 2 years here at HUD. What had the team done? What are some of the bigger items that we worked on? So for every photo, we also had a write-up, and a lot of times you want to make information really accessible to people. So what's really great about Medium, unlike Facebook, is that you can link, hyperlink, almost like you do in an email, to something else so that people can go and get more information. So understanding what the capabilities are for each of your platforms is really important, because we could have probably posted this in a really long blog somewhere else, but is it going to give me that ability to direct folks to more information? Go to the next slide. So the other thing that I like to talk about a lot, what's really difficult sometimes to do with politicals or elected officials, is to show that piece of their personality in their social media account. So Secretary has said this probably numerous times when he's on a panel, but he is a huge fan of sweet tea, probably being that he's from Texas. We share that in common. So you can always see him sipping a glass of sweet tea, whether it's in meetings or if he's waiting to go on stage for a panel. Always got the sweet tea with him. This was a post that we did right before he went on his trip to Puerto Rico. Really easy, just a picture of his briefing book and a glass of sweet tea, and it is probably one of our most liked pictures on Instagram, because it's that behind-the-scenes type of thing that people don't really see. They know what he's going to be talking about for the coming days, and it just gives that personality, right? That he's really connecting with folks, and he's a big fan of this platform as well.
That's great.
Go to the next one. So this is another favorite on Instagram here, and it's another one of those personality things. So every so often we like to share photos of the Secretary in meetings, and he likes to do that as well, and give the people a sense of what he's talking about during the day. What does a typical meeting with the Secretary look like? What are the priorities he has for the department? Does different meetings on affordable housing and on homelessness, and this particular one was a meeting with just our interns and fellows at HUD. So it's this really sometimes intimidating conference room for some of the younger folks in the building, and they come in, they're sitting across from the Secretary just having a regular conversation, and that's another thing that kind of adds that personality. People are so used to seeing Secretary sitting across from a policy expert, but having him sit across from a young lady and talking to her about what her aspirations are is another way to add that personality into the mix. Mm-hmm. So I believe these next two posts, if I'm not mistaken, the next slide is also going to show this as well. Now, the other thing that we do often is, and I talked about this with the Medium post, is finding a way to wrap things up for people, right? Because Twitter is one of those platforms where you don't get on, and typically, unless your friend tells you, oh my God, did you see so-and-so's tweet? Or if they didn't send it to you in a DM already, we don't typically get on Twitter and go back and search, like, what did so-and-so tweet all this week, and sit there and sift through things. So finding different ways to share the same message on the same platform is one of the challenges that, fun challenges really, that we do here at the department. And just also making sure that people are aware, because that's one of really the biggest reason that we use the platform, right, is to make sure that people are aware of not only what the Secretary is doing, but what the department is doing overall. So actually went on this trip with the Secretary to Los Angeles, where he met with a formerly homeless veteran who shared his story and talked about the new supportive housing that he's living in. So we shared his story on Medium, tweeted that link out, shared it with a photo, and then later on again, I think we can go to the next slide now, during the week, shared the exact same thing. And it's almost very similar, but learning different ways to touch people with the same story. The other really big thing, and I don't think it's visible, but learning what time works for your audience is really big, because sharing something at 3 o'clock may work for one person, not work for another, and that's where these tools within these platforms come in really handy, like analytics. So the previous post, if we go back one slide, I think we shared that at like 11 o'clock at night, typically when people are sitting on their couch or in bed scrolling their phones. The next time we shared it, I believe, was on a Sunday. We can go to the next slide. I think it was either around the time, like 9 a.m. in the morning, when people are getting up and they're looking at their phone. So learning what your audience, what times your audience is on their phone checking Twitter, and that changes all the time too. Sometimes we can post at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday and it blows up for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden we get a dip and we're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? So learning to work around that is also really important. So you want to make sure that you're reaching the people that you need to reach who are interested in this information.
So I'm curious for both of you, Joe and Erica. Both of you use social media in your professional lives. But let's say I'm just, I don't have a lot of money, I don't have a lot of resources. I know that I'm trying to build a career. What are kind of the top two things that you say, if you do nothing else, you have to do this, and you should do it well, it's worth your time and investment? What would those two things be? I'll call them Joe and Erica's top two.
I'm going to say it again. I think Facebook is just one of those platforms that is, a lot of people, and I mean, I'm still on it. Whether we want to admit it or not, we're still on Facebook. And there are a lot of unique tools within the platform itself that make it really easy to use. I've said it before, it's like your one-stop shop. You can schedule your posts, you can do slideshows, you can do albums, you can do, I mean, with the Facebook Note, you even have your own form of medium inside. You can share articles, you can share videos. It's a really good one to have. Also, it doesn't take as much maintenance, I believe, as some of the other platforms. Like, you look at Instagram, and people are more attracted to the higher quality photos, the really heavily edited stuff. That's the way Instagram's moving now. And if you don't have the budget or the capacity to, take the time to make sure that your pictures look A1, as I like to say, then you might not get the attention that you want on that platform. So I would say definitely Facebook, and then I would either go with Twitter or Medium. Those are my two other favorite platforms.
So Twitter is kind of like a microblog, but do you think that that everyone should have a blog? Should everyone be on Medium?
I don't think everyone should be on Medium. I think you really just take a look at who your audience is. Also, beyond the audience, what message do you want to share that requires something longer than 140 characters, that requires something longer than a paragraph on Facebook? Are you a photographer, or it all depends on what your business is. Are you a restaurant owner? Are you a politician? Are you a business leader? Figuring out what type of message it is that you want to share, and then figuring out what platform works best for you.
Okay. Joe?
I think, the first thing to remember is, your audience comes first. So understanding your audience and serving your audience has to be paramount. Understanding what they want and really serving their needs and teaching them. If you're working for a nonprofit, you're teaching them every single day. If you're doing what Erica does, you're teaching them about what it takes to do something meaningful in a community. Maybe I'm showing my politics a little bit too much here, but really I think serving your audience is paramount. And the second thing is that there's no one size fits all. Again, as Erica was saying, it really depends. You have to take a look at your audience and serve your audience in a way that's meaningful to them. It's not what you think your audience needs. It's really analyzing your audience and giving them what they want, what they say they want in comments, what they say they want in their Amazon reviews, what they say they want in your podcast reviews, and delivering on a daily basis. That's what it comes down to.
It's interesting. It's such a different way of thinking about either advocacy certainly doing business, this idea that you're going to give and give and give value, content, development, audience of whoever it is that you're trying to get mind share from in order to advance a career or a brand, a product, a service, a consultancy. It's a mind shift, no?
It is a mind shift because these are principles that are ordinarily applied to business and generating revenue and generating new customers and things like that. But really, if you think about it, it's the same thing. You still have to have an audience these days. You can't just, nobody's paying a foundation $50,000 to write some white paper that 25 people, actually some people are still doing this, but it's not going to happen for much longer, where 25 people sit in a room for a white paper and then it just sits on a shelf. And so the organization gets 50,000, 75,000. What is the audience that they're delivering? So these same business principles really have to apply to nonprofits if nonprofits are going to survive. Every nonprofit is a media company, particularly in a market that's as competitive as Washington, D.C. No one can afford to rest on their laurels anymore.
So then if I'm an early career person, I just got to DC, I'm an early career Hill staffer, or I'm at a think tank and I'm just doing research work. What I'm hearing from both of you is that I should be thinking about what channels can help me to establish my brand from a recognition perspective and from an expertise perspective, right? Kind of sharing more about what I do and thinking about how even if I'm writing a 27-page white paper that will sit on a shelf, to think about how that gets communicated versus in visual, in audio via podcast, and certainly via more accessible social media.
Yeah, and you tailor your approach. I'm not belittling white papers at all. All I'm saying is that you have to really think about your personal brand and the brand of your organization. If you're not the primary author of the paper, then you should still be building authority so that when you move on from your organization, or if you're looking for a promotion, you will have built your authority using whatever channels are most comfortable for you, experimenting with the different channels that work well. So if you're the primary author, I mean, it's really the same thing. Your name is the first chair on the paper. But again, just because you're the first chair author, that doesn't mean that your organization is just going to tweet it out to its own followers. You still have to be developing your own personal authority, because you never know what's going to happen at the organization. You never know what's going to happen. So it behooves everyone, whether they're behind the scenes person or the person who's first chair. Some people are introverts, some people are extroverts. There are all types of different ways that people with many different personalities can stay engaged.
So Jason, one of the things that I also want to go back to is what platforms should you be looking at? And I know we talked about just a little bit that the message changes, even though you're talking about the same thing, the way you communicate a certain message can change from platform to platform. The other part of that is also that style is also a part of your voice on social media. So I remember when I first started here at Hill, I came to Hill, I had a meeting with someone from Instagram, and we might encounter this sometimes when we're scrolling our feed too, but what types of photos are you sharing? Are you constantly sharing photos from a podium? Are you sharing photos of someone in action? Consistency is part of style, and style is a part of your voice. So one of the things that he told me is sometimes even the most successful accounts use the same filter throughout. Like, you go to this account and you know what you're going to see. So also making sure that your audience starts to become accustomed to what you want, so that they kind of start craving that. They crave to see those certain types of pictures, or they crave to see a certain message from you, and that's also how you start building that following that a lot of people want.
That's fascinating. Yeah, lo-fi is dope.
I'm a Valencia person.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, both of you, I just want to thank you for being part of this webinar. We're going to make the resources that we talked about today available to everyone. Also, just want to offer you each maybe 30 seconds to offer some last notes, and we will close. As Joe Miller would say, sound like a plan?
Sound like a plan. Listen, everything Erica said, okay, it really comes down to your audience and developing the tools that are right for your audience. It doesn't make sense to waste your time and money and investment shooting off in all different directions. Really understand your marketing strategy first, what you're trying to achieve, understand your audience, and deploy based on that. That's really kind of the takeaway for me.
So same thing, audience is super important, and then more than anything, you know, especially if you're just starting out and you don't have the capacity to do stuff, don't feel like you have to get on every single platform that's out there. You know, you don't have to have the company LinkedIn account. You don't have to have the company Twitter account. You know, if all you can manage is even an Instagram, that's fine. And on top of that, when it comes to understanding what your capacity is, finding ways to use one tool for multiple things. And I've been raving about Facebook, but they also have a live stream. Facebook Live has been working really great for a lot of people. You don't need to launch a YouTube channel if you feel like you can get it all in one platform. Everybody knows now that, or a lot of people know now, that Instagram has a very similar Snapchat-like feature within it. If you feel like you can't launch a Snapchat account and you already have an Instagram account with a following, keep going with that. Find different ways to use what you have to get your message across.
And I would only add to that we're living in a world where we're crossing the path, that time between when social media was just for me and my friends to the idea that we all live in this ecosystem, and we're telling the world what we're about. And if you're about developing a professional brand or a personal brand, you have to tell the world what you're about. And that includes your personal friends. It includes what you share with the world on Twitter and elsewhere. But deciding that you're going to do that means that you should be conscious about what the choices that you're making on social media. I want to thank both of you for this. I learned a lot. I'm inspired by the work that both of you do on a regular basis, and I look forward to many, many more conversations with both of you. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Jason.
Thank you.
Have a great night. And also thank you one more time to State Farm, our sponsor for this webinar series. Bye, everybody.